artists, and welcome to day, I think it's 55. You might have noticed in the last couple of videos that I had a duplicate number. I think I did two 54s. I'm not entirely sure, so I'm going to have to go back and correct it. Somewhere along the line I duplicated my numbers. Alright, so what we're going to do today is we're going to do blending. And we're going to specifically be blending charcoal. Now, you will have known from my previous videos that my favorite way of blending charcoal is simply with my finger, but I will admit that when one is working on a large drawing over a period of time, one's finger can get incredibly sore. I remember doing a drawing in pastels some time ago, and it took me 3 days, and it was 3 full days of drawing. So by the end of it, my fingers were so raw from all the rubbing on the paper that I could hardly touch anything for a couple of days. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through some materials that one can use as an alternative to one's finger. Now, the nicest one, what I have here in front of me, is a piece of chamois leather. This is just your average everyday chamois leather that one can get at the hardware store for washing your car. And as you can see, it gives you a really nice finish, even smoother than your finger does. And the nice thing about chamois as well is that it picks up a lot of charcoal, so you can actually end up blending quite far away from where you originally picked up the charcoal, and you can drag it an enormous distance across your paper and get it quite thin and very smooth. It does tend to have a lot smoother effect as opposed to the finger. Now, one nice way of demonstrating this is to draw a blob of charcoal, get your chamois, pick up some charcoal and drag it across. And as you can see, it goes almost off the page, as opposed to your finger, where it tends to run out. Now notice also how much smoother the charcoal line is with the chamois than it is with your finger. So the chamois is by far the nicest way to do it. One negative thing about a chamois though is that you can't wash it. A chamois leather goes hard once it's been washed. Now, what you can do with your pieces of chamois that you've washed to get all the charcoal off is use them for fine blending. Now, what I have here is a blending stump. This is a stump that one can buy at the artist shop that is layers and layers and layers of paper. When you first buy them, they've got this lovely sharp point on the edge of them, but over time they tend to get a little bit blunt, and when you try and sharpen it again, you just don't quite get the same tip again. So another way is to take your old hardened chamois leathers and wrap them around the point of your blending stump. That gives them a nice softened point. So although it's still sharp, it's got the blending qualities of your softened point. So you can really do some fine work with your blending stump wrapped up in your chamois leather. And again, there's a lot of, it picks up a lot of charcoal again, so you can actually really drag it out. Okay, so that's your chamois leather. A really nice alternative to using your finger. Here I've got in front of me a piece of mutton cloth. Mutton cloth is nice in the sense it's got a little bit of texture to it. It's also incredibly inexpensive. It's also lint free. Now that's one thing that you need to remember when you're looking for alternatives to your finger, is that it must be lint free, because you don't want little bits of paper and crud to be caught up in your charcoal that you then have to clean off. So let's just go further down the page here. We're going to do similar exercises showing the mutton cloth. Again, you wrap it around your finger, drag it out. Now have a look. Can you see how little charcoal it actually drags out compared to the chamois leather? It doesn't pick up nearly as much charcoal, but it is really nice as an alternative to protect your finger. You just got to use a lot more charcoal. It also gives a relatively smooth blend. You've just, like I say, got to give your charcoal a good rubbing so that your mutton cloth has got the charcoal that it needs. So mutton cloth is also a nice alternative to a chamois leather. So let's put that one there. What else can we use? Well, let's have a look at a sponge. Now this sponge has got lots of holes in it, so it actually is quite nice for creating texture, because you can really, let's get some more charcoal on there, you can really start pulling the charcoal out in textured areas. Now look at the nice texture that it's creating there. Now as you can see, it's not picking up a lot of charcoal, so if you want to blend with it, you've really got to give it a good rub. It doesn't pick up a lot of charcoal. But this is actually quite nice for when you're wanting to blend dark areas, because as you will know if you work with charcoal, that the area that you're blending tends to get very light, so you've got to go back and darken it if you're looking for really deep values. But you can never really get black charcoal values unless you now go and spray that with fixative and do another layer of charcoal on top of it. Now look, the same is going to happen with a sponge, but because it doesn't pick up a lot of charcoal, you can actually get really deep dark values, and you get a nice textured, and this also happens with a smooth sponge, by the way. You can get really nice textured blends. So if you're drawing something that's got texture to it, your charcoal can help you to create those textures. Fabric, rocks maybe, the ocean, white on the ocean waves. Okay, what else can we use? Now let's have a look at a piece of paper. Now what I've got here is a piece of tissue paper. Now this is the one item that I don't recommend, not because it doesn't give you a good blending texture, but because the paper itself wears away very quickly, and before you know it, you've got little bits of paper in your drawing. But it does work really well, as you can see. So let's do a drag. Can you see how little it drags out as opposed to the chamois leather? When we drag the chamois leather out, remember how beautifully it pulled it right across. We went almost across the page. Whereas this, oh, alright, I've stopped short here because of this, but it was pretty much run out at that point anyway. And look how loaded it is on that side. So depending on what you're looking for, this piece of paper, tissue paper, might well do the trick for you, but you've got to understand the tools that you're working with and which best suits what you're doing. Nowhere near as smooth as the chamois, but also can create a nice in-between texture. That texture is not as rough as the sponge texture, but not as smooth as the chamois texture. I'm just going to redo the chamois texture here with a slightly heavier charcoal so that you can see the difference. Now the nice thing about the chamois as well is that you don't have to press very hard, because it picks up the charcoal so beautifully. Now we're going to use a brush. Now this is something I also don't specifically recommend, but again, if it suits your needs, then by all means use it. And the reason I don't recommend a brush is for no other reason except that it doesn't, watch, it doesn't pick up a lot of charcoal. It doesn't take it very far. So you've got to be very careful of your blending. Now you'll see also when you're blending the charcoal, that with the brush that is, that you get these edges happening, and it's actually really difficult to blend it smoothly into the paper without getting any kind of an edge. So blending with a brush would take a lot of practice, and it's not the most effective way of doing it. It also tends to pick up a lot of charcoal off the paper, so if you're trying to blend very dark areas, have a look here. If you're trying to blend very dark areas, you're going to find that you're going to need to put a lot of charcoal down, fix it, and then put a lot more charcoal down. But of course, the heavier your charcoal is, the more you're going to get those brush marks happening and how difficult it is to blend them out. So brushing with your charcoal is not the most effective way to do it. Right, what I've got here in front of me is a piece of wet wipe. You know, you buy those baby wipes or hand wipes that are damp inside a little plastic thing. You pull the top off and you take one out and it's damp enough for you to wipe your hands. Well, it's simply the same cloth, just laid out to get dry, because you obviously don't want it to be wet. So let's have a look and see what a dry wet wipe does. How's that for a paradox? Again, you wrap it around your finger. Now can you see how it's not really dragging the charcoal out very far? It's giving us a bit of a texture, and where I had my charcoal originally on the paper, it's giving us quite a hard line. You of course can overcome that with effort. So if this is the texture that you're looking for, then by all means use it. It can rescue your finger from being quite badly rubbed raw. But it's not going to give you the same smoothness of texture that a chamois leather is going to give you. Well, there you have it, artists. There's some experimenting with various materials to try and get good charcoal blending techniques going. My strong recommendation is the chamois leather. You can buy fake chamois leather if you're vegan and you don't want to worry about using a genuine leather chamois. But in my opinion, your chamois leather is going to give you the best blending techniques, and the others are going to give you good alternatives, depending of course on what it is that you're trying to achieve with that particular drawing. So the moral of the story here is that you don't have to use only your finger, and you don't have to use only a blending stump. You can use pretty much anything you like to get the texture and get your drawing looking like what it is that you're wanting it to look like. For those of you that do a lot of charcoal drawing, I hope this little tutorial helped you to understand what you can do with charcoal and various different blending tools, and I hope that you will share and like and spread it around the internet. And don't forget the YouTube channel, please, and I will see you tomorrow in what I think is day 55. Thank you for joining me. See you tomorrow. Bye. That's what you want to do.